comfortable with the schedule that we have. So, and we're working extremely hard. I've never seen a bunch of guys work as hard as we have, and I feel like our senior leadership is where it needs to be, and so it's spreading throughout the team in a positive way. And yeah, I'm just really excited for week 1 against St. Thomas Aquinas.
Hello and welcome to the Trinity League Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Albano, and I'm joined once again by insider Scott Barajas. That lead-in voice that you heard to start the show was St. John Bosco quarterback Re-al Mitchell of the reigning state champion Braves. We will close the show by hearing from Mater Dei left tackle and Alabama commit Tommy Brown. But for now, let's welcome in for his third season back with us on the Trinity League Football Podcast, our insider, Scott Barajas. How you doing tonight, Scotty?
Well, I'm doing good, Dan. You know me. I'm ready to go for the season.
Yes, we are finally here at the 2017 football season. So over about our show tonight, kind of just to set the table, we're going to preview the 2017 Trinity League football season by breaking down strengths and weaknesses for each team. Scott is going to provide some insight on a few under-the-radar players to watch from each team. And then from there, we're going to talk briefly about the Week 0 schedule for Friday, August 25th. All the Trinity League teams will be starting their seasons on that date. And we're also going to conclude the show with our official predictions. But for right now, we're going to start breaking down the Trinity League teams for 2017 with some breakdown analysis from Scott Barajas. We're looking at strengths and weaknesses for both teams. All these teams are excellent, but every team's got a couple areas of strength, a couple areas of concern, and that's what makes these games so exciting. So let's start off with JSerra, Scotty, out of San Juan Capistrano. First-year coach Pat Harlow, the former USC offensive lineman, former NFL lineman. He's got a son playing in the NFL as well. What's your thoughts on the strengths and weaknesses for the Lions?
You know, it's interesting because JSerra, for the past couple of years has always been that team that everyone's not too sure coming out of the gate because they have either lost a lot of kids or they lost a lot of kids to graduation.
Right.
But this year is actually the first year that's not the case. They don't have a lot of depth. They did get a lot of transfers, and that aided, their skills on both sides of the ball. But primarily their strength going into this year is probably going to be their offensive balance. They picked up, the two transfer receivers from Santa Margarita, the two McLean brothers. One's going to play defense, and the other one, Munar, is going to play the offense. And then they have Tarek Luckett. And those two guys are going to really boost JSerra's offensive output because they haven't had really big-time receivers for the last couple of years.
Right.
And then with Robinson being able to scramble and make plays with his feet as well as outside the pocket, that's going to make them pretty much, a deadly force. And then they also got a huge upgrade with the return of former JSerra back Al-G Fisher, who was at Paramount the last 2 years, and he was a standout on the freshman team, and he ran for 1,300 yards at Paramount last year. And then they also added a Buena Park two-way standout junior, Jamil Henning, and he ran for 856 for Buena Park last year as a sophomore. So those two both their running game, which JSerra didn't have coming into the season. So that's going to give them some firepower, to go with, their offensive line is probably the third best in the Trinity League with Parks and Jack Bullock. And then I think Chad May, he's coming back from a knee surgery. I think, he's supposed to be into that mix as well. So that's pretty much the strengths on their side. Their weaknesses are pretty much, like we said, their depth, and their defense is actually very fast and very quick, but they're small. Their linebackers all range about that 5'10", 210 range, and their secondary is all pretty much about 5'10", 170, and then, when you play against those bigger teams, sometimes that can be an issue down the line, but their quickness will get them out of that. But if you want to call a weakness, that's pretty much it. Other than that, they really don't have any other than pretty much depth. So, JSerra is one of those teams that you're going to have to watch out for, because the start of the season, like you said, they're primed and ready to go.
Yeah. To your point on the balance, too, is special teams. It made me think a little bit. They also have one of the better punters in Orange County, and that's Jake Haggard, a punter, kicker, maybe the Ryan Stonehouse of the Trinity League this year, and he was big for Mater Dei at big moments. He didn't punt very much, but when he did, they were big moments for the Monarchs. I think back to those, the first Bosco game in league, he was one of the, three standout stars of the game. But Haggard's a guy to keep an eye on, because apparently he's a guy who can switch the position of the field position game pretty quickly. That's senior. But I agree with you also, and I think their offense is dynamite. I think Matt Robinson is poised for a big year, the Montana State commit. Munar, I think, is going to be their number one receiver. He's a junior. His brother, Abdul Malik, is a senior, committed to UCLA. Munar is a 6'4", 200-pound, just thoroughbred out there at receiver. But like you mentioned, Tark Luckett is a rising junior, 6'2" as well. So they have a couple big receiver. I like those running backs. I think their offensive line, I think you're spot on. I think, defensively, they're not big, like you mentioned. I was at their practice. It's our OCVarsity game of the week to start out week 0 is the Corona Del Mar game. And I watched their practice, and I'd say as a whole, their team didn't on the line did not strike me as too big. But they do have. I think they're going to be fast though, because Abdul Malik is extremely fast at the defensive end that UCLA commits. So he's more of almost like outside linebacker. And then and then it's going to be a two-way. I think Jack Bullock, who you mentioned, who's got he's got a couple scholarship offers that 6'5", 230. So that's kind of their line. They have a few guys like that. Jack's going to be a two-way lineman for him. Jake Parks is their biggest guy at 6'4", 290. And I think you mentioned Ryan May, is a 5'11", 250 guy. And then Sean Nielsen's another D tackle for them, 6'3", 245. That's kind of the guys that you're looking at.
Right, and then I know it's interesting because I actually went to the Norco JSerra scrimmage, and a lot of their guys were listed a lot bigger than what they were listed, and I know Abdul Malik, I've seen him as listed as 6'4", as big as 235, and he to me looked about 6'2", maybe 235. I mean, he didn't look near 6'4", so, and same with Munar. Munar looked closer to 6'1", 180. So, I mean, I know sometimes they kind of get, it's across up the board with everybody in high school, but
sure.
It was just something that I noticed. But that their defense, whether it's small or not, they were very quick and they pursued the ball very well. So that's what's going to keep them in the games. It's just when they go against teams that have massive fronts, and not many do right now. The only two we can think of offhand are Mater Dei and Bosco, which happen to be in the league. But other than that, they should be able to play with everybody else.
Yeah, I think depth, size will be important for them, and they have, with a lot of the transfers, they have to gel and find some good chemistry. But I think they'll be able to accomplish that. Let's move to Santa Margarita, Scotty, our second team in our Trinity League breakdown, strengths and weaknesses. Coach Rich Fisher is back for his second year. Santa Margarita, what do you see out of the Eagles this year, where they have got a couple good running backs, they got some pretty good tight ends, but some questions, I would say. What's your analysis of Coach Fisher's team?
Yeah, Santa Margarita, I mean, they have, I think, 4 offensive returners and 7 defensive returners, but their strength of pretty much are going to be their running backs and linebackers. And they have Chad Maynard coming back, Magar, and he was pretty much an all-purpose back. And then they're going to move Malone Matele to running back, is what I'm hearing. I mean, he's more like an all-purpose back as well, so they could put him in the backfield, line him up at slot. But I think their plan is to get those two guys the ball as much as possible, and I think that's why they want to get the ball in his hand at running back, because he's a game changer at running back. 2 steps and he's gone. I mean, we saw him as a special teams threat, how many kickoffs and punt returns he returned last year. So I think, that's a smart move trying to get him at running back because you can do more things with him. He'll have more touches, like we said. And then for their the other strength was the linebackers, and I think they also have the two tight ends that I believe are going to also Jake Peters and missing the other guy's name.
McCartney.
The other tight end. McCartney, the commit to Fresno State.
Right.
He's also, both of those guys I think are going to be two-way guys and play both on the line and tight end, and so they'll have that bolstering also with the junior Alex Killander. He's the other returner they have on the D line, and then you have Caden Fitch and Gideon DeGravo coming back as the two linebackers that were pretty good last year. So that's pretty much their strengths. Their weaknesses are going to be obviously overall skills. Receivers wise, they don't have anybody coming back that has any significant playing time, except for, like you said, the two guys that we mentioned on running back. And their secondary, the same thing. I think Malone probably going to play secondary. He played, I think, the nickel back last year. He started out as corner. They moved him inside. I think Canty also comes back as a returner, and then Chris Canty comes back, I think, as a returner as free safety.
Joseph Canty, I think it is, right? Joseph Canty.
I pretty much think, the Santa Margarita is going to have to, come together and rally a lot, because I don't know how much of those, their offensive fire, their skill power isn't going to be matching with all the other teams in the league. We didn't touch on the quarterback because it's like they have three transfers that they got in. I think Josiah Norwood from Troy, who looks to be the front runner, and I think Johnny Parkinson from Utah, and then Hunter Cerfuentes from Tesoro,
right,
that are all battling out. And I think that coach has said he's not going to determine the starter until the day of the game. So I think you're going to go with Norwood just because he's the dual threat. But coming into the Freeway League, into a Trinity League, division it's a big jump for a quarterback to make. So that'll be one thing to watch for. If they can get that going, then that will add some extra firepower to their offense. But that remains to be seen.
Yeah, you know what? I kind of think as far as, playing to Santa Margarita's strengths, if I'm Rich Fisher, who's right out of the college ranks, smart coach, I think there's a big decision for them to make, and we don't know. They've apparently, Rich told me, Coach Fisher said that they have selected a coach. They have selected a quarterback, excuse me. They've selected a quarterback, but they're not going to publicly say who it is until they take on Downey, that first series. But they've got their guy. But I think the big decision for Santa Margarita is, are they going to try to, really kind of make over their offense, which was kind of as far as I remember, kind of a two-back, pretty pro-style offense last year. Are they going to try to get it going more, maybe, to mold it after their quarterback strengths? So this one, if it is Josiah, because they're different guys, and could they revamp it? And could they maybe look at it and say, hey, Josiah, you be our Re-al Mitchell? Because we have, and we're going to run some of that option out of the spread. They have a good running back, back like we mentioned, in Magyar. Malone, they could definitely put him at running back. He also could play receiver. Malone said he's going to play. Batelli's going to play some receiver too. But I could see them trying to gear up and try to get a ground attack, kind of like Bosco, where they have a good athlete at quarterback. They have potentially two good running backs. What they don't have, what Bosco has, is, and really makes it so effective when they can have the threats on the outside, so maybe not. But I wonder if they'll radically change the offense, Scotty. I don't know if you've thought about that, where, if you're going to play to your strengths, you maybe have to keep Malone out there a little bit more to at least get a threat. But I could see some kind of option and a big radical change from the SM attack, where the kid from Logan, Utah, Parkinson, he's a pro-style quarterback, very different. Maybe they'll mix it up. But what do you think? I got to think the wheels were turning over at SM.
Yeah, that is true. Basically, if you're going to get the athletes on the field, Parkinson, if he is a drop back passer, they don't have them on the guys on the outside to stretch the field. So if you go Norwood and you play to your strength, you play to, that gives you the dual threat run option pass. It gives you more more flexibility with the two backs in the backfield. So that's the is that the secret that Santa Margarita is holding on to? We'll see, but that my guess is that it's going to be Norwood. And from what I'm hearing from other people is that they say that he's looked pretty good in camp, but it just no one has come out straightfully and said he's the guy. So
it's interesting too, Scotty, because I think of you. The OCVarsity preseason rankings had Santa Margarita 4, which I know that raised some eyebrows with you and probably some other people. That's too high in my book. I'm on record saying that I think the third and fourth best teams in Orange County are the same 3 and 4 best teams in the Trinity League, and it's JSerra or OLU. Those are 3 and 4 in the Trinity League. They're 3 and 4 in Orange County. I'm skipping, of course, with Mission Viejo. It's Mater Dei in Orange County, Mission Viejo, and then it's, in my opinion, it's JSerra OLU, 3 and 4 in Orange County. And they're the same in the 3 and 4 in the Trinity League. But the thing is that the other thing with Santa Margarita, though, with their strength is that they got 2 Division I tight ends. They have John McCartan, who's a heck of a blocker. I checked in with his one of his old assistant coaches, Jeff Grady, was at Santa Margarita last year. Now he's the head coach at Edison, Jeff Grady. He said McCartan's a heck of a blocker. They also have Peters is back. Jake Peters is back healthy now. He's a beast at tight end. And he got an offer from Arizona, and he was banged up most of the year with an injury. So you got 2 out. So that makes them much more different. You got 2 Division I tight ends, 2 really good dynamic running backs, and a quarterback that can run. It could be interesting, if they because their weakness, I agree, is I'm not sure about their defense. Like they said, they got some good linebackers, but the secondary, the D line, we'll see. But they got a lot of pieces as far as a ground attack. Man, if they just had a receiver, Scotty, or a couple of receivers, if they had some skill players, that offense could be really dynamic.
Yeah, that is true, because you do with 2 tight ends, and it's funny because, and we'll talk about this later, but Mater Dei loves back in the day when they had 2 tight ends, and this year they actually have a couple of guys that they're allowed. It's going to allow them to do some things differently, but they love to have that, because I guess when you have mismatches that big in the high school level, that it seems to be, if you think about all the tight ends that have come across the high school and Orange County scene, Blake Ailes, Thomas DeWarde was a tight end receiver. There was the other tight end from Mission Viejo. He just passed away.
Ruland.
When he played, so they do change the game, and they create like mismatches. Now we'll see. Maybe that's what Santa Margarita is planning to do. And we just it's been under the radar because they're not the flashy skill guys that we're all accustomed to seeing in the league. So
and that really, it could be interesting because like you said, the tight end position is not heavily used in high school football. There's a lot of good tight ends this year, and these guys can be moving around. You got a college coach in Coach Fisher, but all the coaches are outstanding in the Trinity League. But it does create some matchups and some nightmares for some high school linebackers. So should be interesting. There's some intrigue to Santa Margarita, but also some concerns. So let's also look at our third team. Got a new coach here at our third team as we preview the Trinity League 2017 and teams to watch, and that's going to be Orange Lutheran. And their new coach is now J.P. Presley. What's your strengths and weaknesses, Scotty, on the Lancers?
Going into the year, we were looking to look at strengths for for Orange Lutheran, and at the time, you would have to say basically it's their quarterback because that's all they return. They return 2 offensive starters, basically Helinski and Noah Crandall, I believe. But since then, in the offseason, they picked up not only 1, but 2, but 3, but 4 receivers from across the county. I mean, going into the year, they were probably had 11 receptions and 87 yards of returning production. That was the receivers. After they picked up the transfers, now they jumped to 89 receptions, 1,400 yards, and 11 touchdowns with experience. That's going to be the strength this year, and it's going to be, it's going to be Kyle Ford, who came over from Servite. It's going to be Cameron Gardner, who came over from Mater Dei. It's going to be JoJo Hawkins, who came over from Buena Park. And unfortunately, it was going to be Ethan Ray until he got injured, the big tight end, and then we just got done talking about tight ends, and that was going to be huge for them. And they also returned Logan Loya, who is going to be a sophomore, and that's going to give them a dynamic fit on their offense. And that's pretty much going to be their strength across their overall team. Now their weaknesses is going to be offensive and defensive lines, and those are 2 ones you don't want to have to hear about when you're talking Trinity League. They return I think only 1. Lateo Feo Cola, I'm probably butchering his name, Cola Pia. However, they did pick up 2 junior transfers from Villa Park and Garden Grove, but I don't know how much those guys are going to really help coming into the Trinity League. That's a big jump. They may get worked in, but who knows. And then on on the defensive side, they only returned 1 returning starter, and that's Jay Cosavella. He had 2 sacks last year. So it's it's one of those things. It's like, can you compete with not having any offensive and defensive line play? Well, yeah, you can. It just makes things a little bit interesting, and hopefully, they'll gel together and pick it up. I mean, on top of their strengths, they're also going to have a running back that they also picked up from Lusinger. And I mentioned him because now they have 2 backs that they can go to as well. And he was a 1,000-yard rusher last year, and his name is Daniel Carmichael. And he's going to combine experience with Noah Crandall, who was the other running back that comes back. So, gives Helinski a lot more to work with. And that's pretty much, Olu's strength and weaknesses, and whether or not they can put it together, that's going to be interesting. Because for the longest time, I was toying, Olu, JSerra, until I saw JSerra, and then I saw their physicality, and they just had a little bit more. I mean, other than Orange Lutheran's skill receivers, but that wasn't enough to give them the jump over JSerra.
Yeah, interesting. I think, and on the Orange Lutheran roster, I think it's DC Carmichael. They're spelling it Carmicle, 5'10", 205 senior. I believe that's the running back you're talking about, right, Scotty?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, their outstanding skill is really their strength. And then quarterback and Ryan Helinski, Jr. on the rise, 6'4", 218. Junior got an offer from Boston College. I think is poised for a huge year. It's kind of interesting how Orange Lutheran and JSerra we're kind of pitting them together already. And both these quarterbacks were once together at JSerra. Helinski. Funny how they they're competing again, but I think their skill is outstanding. At receiver, they're really going to be dynamic. Orange Lutheran won the Huntington Beach passing tournament late in the summer, and the weaknesses is this going to be protection for Helinski and defense. I think a lot of these guys these skill guys will be going both ways. And they have there's one cornerback, I think you mentioned Joseph Forrest, right? He's a pretty good corner for him.
Yeah, he started last year as a sophomore, and he's actually had a very good offseason. He's very long, as far as he's got long arms. He kind of reminds me of last year's Mater Dei corner, Quentin Lake. He's got that same. He's not a 6'2" guy, but he's got the same length, the same, long arms, and that makes for great corners, to knock balls away. And he went to the Alabama camp over the summer, and I supposedly he got great reviews from Alabama, but they told him these are the things you need to work on, and we'll watch you. But he is definitely one to watch for on the defensive side.
Yeah, that's Joseph Forrest, 5'10", 170 junior, and a lot of guys on their roster are guys like Joseph, where they're listing them as corners, wide receivers. DC Carmichael, who you mentioned, they list him as a strong safety. Josiah Hawkins, I know you mentioned him. He's also listed at wide receiver, defensive back. Loya, strong safety, wide receiver. Even, Cameron Gardner, I know you're high on. Very fast. I believe he's a junior. He's 5'11", 170. He's also listed at safety. So they got a lot of skills, and I think they're gonna. I think for their team, they might have a lot of two-way players, and that'll be interesting. I think there might be. I kind of get the theme or the vibe that there'll be more two-way players in the Trinity League this year already. Because we've already talked about a couple at JSerra. So you mentioned some at Santa Margarita. There's going to be some guys here at Orange Lutheran, and we already know a couple that could be called into double two-way duty at Mater Dei. So, are you getting that vibe that there's going to be a lot of that this year too?
I do, and it'll be more situational play. Might not be. The only team that I think is going to be outright two-way guys is Servite, and we can get to them in a little bit.
Yeah.
But I know, as far as Olu secondary, they also returned Drew Ramirez and Jacob DeWitt, and they all started last year as sophomores, and then they also picked up a junior transfer from Buena Park who played 10 games for the Coyotes, and he was a strong safety, and so I think that, whether or not he's going to be in that mix as well. I know Cameron, and I know those guys can play both ways. I know Ethan Ray was going to be a two-way guy. He was going to be a defensive end, so I know that that hurt them. I know JoJo might be like a nickel back. I could see him being a nickel back. I think Cameron's going to be pretty much a one-way guy unless he has to go, unless he's pressed into duty. But I pretty much think they're set. Loya, I think he's a one-way guy because he's also their kicker. So I know they don't want him to. He's a pretty good kicker as well. So, but there is, we can touch base on all the other players that are going to be two-way guys. But primarily, that's what I see coming out of the Olu.
Okay. All right. Well, as we continue our breakdown of the Trinity League teams to watch this year, so we've covered so far. We covered JSerra, Santa Margarita, and we've covered now Orange Lutheran. Let's switch over to those Servite Friars. Scott Meyer back at the helm. We saw them impress at the Battle at the Beach tournament. They were a newcomer to that tournament, made it as a top seed at that Edison tournament. They were the top seed, made it to the quarterfinals, lost close one to Mater Dei. So they had a good summer as far as their skill positions in defensive secondary and quarterback and receivers and DBs look really good. But and then they got some changes there. Got a new offensive coordinator, Coach Bass from Centennial. Servite switching over to the Centennial spread type hurry-up offense. What's your thoughts on the Friars, Scotty?
If Servite was going to have, they still do have a pretty good offense, but primarily their strength is going to be their secondary, and their secondary returns four guys. Pretty much the only guy they lose is Keith Taylor, but they return Julius Irving, they return Trent McDuffie, and they return KJ Trujillo at corner, and they also picked up Mater Dei transfer Titus Toller, who was a strong safety for Mater Dei last year, and then they also have an up-and-coming sophomore, Cade Fuller, who is actually, I believe, is going to play the strong safety spot, which is interesting because that means that Titus is going to be playing corner. And from
right.
what I understand is that Titus, KJ, and McDuffie are all in a 3-man rotation, meaning you're going to see probably a lot of those guys on the field in that to get their athlete package. They're going to be like the nickel package. You're going to see that probably on the field a lot, and that's going to be their strength. You know, their skills on that side of the ball. Probably, I was going to say, you know, wide receiver. DeLon Hurd is a really good receiver. He's got really good hands. He's upped his game, and he's going to, you know, with Kyle Ford, you know, gone, he's going to be their number one guy. And then Trent McDuffie, who we were talking about, I think he's going to be a two-way player who's going to be on the field a lot. So you're going to see him being as that other receiver, getting his touches, and then Dominic Winfield comes back after catching 34 passes last year. So they got pretty good skill receivers as well. You know, their weaknesses is probably going to be their running back, which is not a good sign when you're going to run that Centennial spread, because they don't have the back that makes that offense really go to be effective. They have 3 running backs. William Dean, who's a big running back, he doesn't really fit that mold. They have Daniel Hernandez, who's small, but he's 5'6", 150 pounds. And then they have a transfer from Olu, Malachi Rice, who will be a sophomore, and he fits that style, but he's not very quick. He's about 5'10", 185. So it's going to be interesting to see how they make that offense work. I mean, they have 2 quarterbacks, TJ McMahon and Caden Bell, and they alternated throughout the year. TJ McMahon, the brother of former Mater Dei and now Colorado Rockies baseball player Ryan McMahon.
Right.
And he's an athlete. He played receiver last year, you know, as well as being the backup, so he could run that very well. I'm hearing, though, that Caden Bell is actually doing really well, too. So they could do two-way, you know, they haven't decided either who's actually going to be the starter. But
yeah, I need to check on that.
yeah, so that's you know, that's something to watch for, too, coming out with the new offense and with, you know, the personnel not being different. And their other weakness is probably defensive line. You know, their interior linemen aren't very big. I think John Barajas at 6'1", 260 is their biggest on the line. They do have Clayton Martin coming back. I think he was an offensive line, but he's more an offensive lineman than he is a defensive line, but he gives him size at 6'5", 290. But you know, that's probably what's going to be. It's going to hinder them down the line unless they can find something within, you know, that we don't know about. But right now, that's what it looks like for the Friars.
Yeah, I could see that they're probably going to play some two-way linemen, you know, to try to you know, help them along the lines. You know, I could see that. You know, they had. I mean, you look at their roster. I mean, they got guys that are some 290s, 285, 255, 290s, 310s, 295, 295. I mean, they got some big boys, but I think they're going to be a lot of two-way linemen.
Yeah, their offense is pretty big. When just like you had said, when I looked at it, I'm like, you know what? I think they probably have, like, you know, if not second, close. You know, I think they're 260, 264, 290 across the front on their offense. So you know, but it doesn't. They only return 2 guys, Parker Thomas and Luke Laciento. You know, those are the only 2 guys they have coming back. But like you said, they do have, you know, big solid kids. So.
Yeah, I think their skill positions are outstanding. I mean, as far as what they have at receiver, with their two-way guys, their secondary is outstanding. You know, I think Julius Irvin is going to be poised for a huge year. I think he's going to play more offense. You know, I liked what they did when I saw him in the summer league passing. I loved seeing Julius going deep and running DeLon on some of those, you know, those out routes or some, you know, short stuff, letting him use his size and strength. You know, making tough catches and really moving the sticks. And then, you know, I think Trent McDuffie's really on the rise. So it'd be, you know, if, you know, like I said, you know, like you said, I think you're right. Their concern will be, can they get a pass rush? I think they have good linebackers. I do like Spencer Lytle. and I do like Joe Christensen. So I think their linebacker group is pretty good. So I think they're going to be fine if anybody throws against when teams obviously are going to throw against Servite. I think they'll be okay pass rush, but see how they do stopping the run. And if you think about if they could get a pass rush going on, then their defense could be really really outstanding. If they could pressure people on their throws and then take advantage of their athletes, that could be turnover city. But I don't think they have a dynamic guy that I know of that can really force that ball out. Maybe they can do scheme-wise. Maybe they have enough guys that they can do some blitzing and get real creative that way. And then, the running game. I mean, how many good running backs have we seen at Centennial, right? I mean, that's been a staple. What really makes that offense go. And it's kind of like Bosco, too, right? I mean, the way Bosco spreads it out, but they have good running backs.
Yeah, it comes down to like the quarter, comes down to usually it's three. It's a quarterback, line, running backs, and they all seem to like work as one, and if you're missing one of those components, but it like you're right. When you look at all Centennial, they all fit that same style. 5'7", 5'8", 180, quick as can be, quick as a cat. The quarterback is usually a guy who's very athletic. He can, and they run that with precision. Can Servite run that like precision and quick? It takes a, Centennial's been doing it for a long time.
Right.
Coming in, and trying to install it in this first year. I don't know what really to expect with Servite coming in, but we'll get a taste of it Friday when they take on Norco. So.
Yep, on the road. All right, well, two more teams to cover, and it's the big boys we left for the last. So thanks again for joining us on our Trinity League Football Podcast. Let's start with Mater Dei. Number one in the nation according to Max Preps and USA Today. Number one in Orange County. Coach Bruce Rollinson returns J.T. Daniels, star-studded wide receiver group led by Amon-Ra St. Brown. They've got a great, the best offensive line in Orange County by far, anchored by left tackle Tommy Brown. We mentioned we'll be hearing from him in a little while. Got some big transfers. Big transfer at middle linebacker. Solomon, Tulia Pupu from Claremont is in there. Genova's back healthy. Young secondary. No starters back in the secondary. What's your breakdown on the Monarchs, Scotty?
I mean, pretty much it's no secret, their offensive firepower across the board, whether it's the receivers, the line, quarterback, even running backs. The running backs are unheralded, but pretty much it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, C.J. Parks, Nico Regimio, Brew McCoy. Those they're not a Fab Five this year, so they're going to be the Fantastic Four, but
I like
still going to be. Then you get, and then you talk to JT, and he's, basically is adamant that C.J. Parks is, if Amon-Ra's 1A, C.J.'s, 1B, or, he's right there with
right.
Amon-Ra as far as being that dynamic. He can throw it anywhere, and, he'll go up and get it just as St. Brown does, and that he is just equally as dominant. It's going to be, an interesting with that offense because they also have two running backs, Jacoby Harper, and he ran for 660 yards, 14 touchdowns in an offense that didn't really feature that much of a running game. So, and then they also get Chris Street, an up-and-coming sophomore as well to add to that. So I think they, they may not, air raid as much as they did last year because I know down the stretch they needed the running game. In a couple of games they kind of struggled where they needed the running game, and the running game just wasn't quite the strength or wasn't quite there that it is now. But you have those, then you have the three big boys to lean on, Tommy Brown, Chris Murray, and Kakani Gonzalez, who are all three-way, 3-year starters. So, and then they moved Andrew Folio over to defense, making way for sophomore Miles Moreau, who will be a national recruit by the his natural position. He filled in last year at tackle and did an awesome job last year for Mater Dei. And he could have easily stayed there, but they needed him more on defense, and with Miles, they were allowed to have that. Their weaknesses, it's going to be more or less inexperience in the secondary. As
right.
I said, nobody returns, but they grew up in the summer. We know it's passing league and it's different. Some people take it with a grain of salt, but they really stepped it up in passing league and got a lot of experience. And then they also, they're going to have 2 seniors and 2 sophomores in the lineup. They also have a couple of more sophomores in their nickel package as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that. But I think it's just a matter of just getting that experience. Elias Ricks and Darian Green, 2 sophomores who already have Big Ten, major offers. I think both of them have about 6 offers to Nebraska, Colorado, Oklahoma, Utah, Oregon, Boise State. So they're already, they have the talent. They just need the experience. And then they also had picked up another transfer from Bosco, who will be It's interesting with him because he coming out of Bosco.
Zion, right?
Zion Alefosio.
Alefosio. Alefosio.
Faseo, yes. He was the number 1 youth player coming into 8th grade or coming into freshman ball. People can take that with a grain of salt, laugh about it all you will, but it's an honor. It tells you what type of player he is. And he's actually probably, he's going to play somewhere either, strong safety or nickel package, but he's one to keep an eye on. And so, so they have the youth movement, but they're very, very talented. So it's just a matter of, how that gels together when they play, when they're playing against these big games right away. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Is just how is it going to be? That weakness and that unknown for Mater Dei in the secondary. I'm interested to see how these guys look in pads, how physical they are. How can when somebody does break a run and there's a ball carrier in the secondary, how are they going to tackle? Who's going to come up at safety? We've seen that the last couple of years from those veteran Mater Dei players. Whether it was Bell or they put Kefentis back there. Who's playing center field and is there's going to be plays back there. Once wide receivers, if they get catches, who's going to tackle these guys? So I think that's a legitimate concern as well as these guys have got, recruited and looked during the summer. I'm interested to see them in the pads, and it's another level, and all those guys would say the same thing. I remember, I was at Mater Dei recently, and Amon-Ra was saying, he was pretty much saying the same thing. Everybody, you can look good in summer. That's one thing. But it's a whole different ball game. And once the pad goes on, the lights go on Friday nights, and you got big guys running at you, and you need to bring them down. So that'll be interesting. I think their offense will be just dynamic, and I don't think there's any question marks there. Great offensive line. JT returning OC Register Offensive Player of the Year. Got to watch his health. I think Mater Dei's been cautious with him and smart with JT. That's the franchise there. Such a smart kid. Mater Dei knows how to manage quarterbacks. USC commit, so they're going to be smart with him. But he's have to monitor him, and Amon-Ra as well has got a finger. I don't think he's going to play in the opener. He's a game time decision. I'm expecting him not to play, but I'm interested to see how JT's feeling. But I get the feeling that he's okay. And they've been smart with him and avoided some trouble. But I think he's going to be good to go, and he's going to, I think he's going to push 70 touchdowns and try to get 5,000 yards. But might not play that much in the Bosco opener. But and I think defensive the defensive tackle is going to be important too. If they got to get some, they're going to have to get a good push, and they have some good guys on the edge with, like you said, Andrew, Logalego, some other guys. But they're going to have to, and they have great linebackers to help stuff that run. But they're going to be flying around around the place. They're going to need some push up the middle.
Yeah, that you're absolutely right. As far as with JT, I know there was a lot of talk with him, and everybody had their opinions and had their know-it-alls and had to say kept that there was more to it than it was. But yeah, they basically were smart with him, and he'll be ready to go. And it is no secret that they don't have a backup, a reliable backup. I know the backup kids did well in the summer, but that's a whole different story. So that they got to be smart, with him. And I think he's the reports are coming out that he's good to go and he's fine. So it's just a matter of being able to stay healthy. As all the teams want to stay healthy. Even with Amon-Ra, I don't think he'll be back either. They want to make sure that finger's mended all the way. You don't want to have any setbacks. To hurry up and rush back and be out for more games when there's still 10 games left. So.